Sure, I could start. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you very much first for giving us the opportunity to come out here today and meet with all of you. My name is Gina Degenova. I'm the Chief Assistant Prosecutor at the Mahoning County Prosecutor's Office. I'm also the Public Information Officer. And my position as the Public Information Officer is a fairly new position. I was promoted to that position last year, and we have really tried to hit the ground running with different initiatives and different ways to interact with the community and to build the gap between our office, increase transparency. And we have put together a lot of initiatives that I can talk about a little bit later. And I can just briefly introduce, and then they can say a few words. To my right is my colleague and fellow Chief Assistant Prosecutor Lynette Stratford, and we've got Dion Allmusi. She is an Assistant Prosecuting Attorney. She's been with the office for many years, as has Lynette. To my left is our Criminal Chief, Jennifer McLaughlin, and Joe Max is an Assistant Prosecutor, and he is assigned to Judge D'Onofrio. Durkin.
Well,
yeah, one of them.
But he's been to all of them.
He's been to all of them.
But I also have, through Judge D'Appolito, the Honors Court. I'm assigned to that court and also the Drug Court, and I've also worked in the Mental Health Court. So I'm familiar with the various diversionary courts.
And then if maybe each one of you guys can say a few words about your background.
Okay. I've been the Chief of the Criminal Division since the beginning of 2021, but I've been at the office since 2008. A large part of my time on the criminal dockets was spent on the Violence Against Women unit. We prosecute sexual assaults, child abuse cases, child pornography, domestic violence, and domestic homicide. So that was a large part of my prosecutorial career before I was promoted to Chief of Criminal.
So I'm Lynette Stratford, and I've been with the Prosecutor's Office since 1994. Seen a lot of changes over the years. I've been the Chief Assistant since 2011. Prior to that, I was the Chief of the Civil Division. So I'm very intimately involved and with the office and everything that we do. And reaching out to the community has always been something that I've wanted to see more of. And I'm really excited to have to work with Gina and everyone else in our office now to get out there into the community and really make Mahoning County and Youngstown in particular what it is and what I remember it being, and even better, like you said, make it more than it ever was. And so we're so happy to be invited in to be part of that. So thank you.
I'm Dion Allmusi. I am an assistant prosecutor with the county. I have been with the county since 2006. Prior to that, I was the chief prosecutor for the city of Youngstown. I worked closely with Pat Kerrigan at that time. We had a lot of memories. Currently, I am assigned to the Civil Division. I work with the Department of Job and Family Services. I handle adult protective service matters, all of our contractual matters, labor issues, benefits issues, anything that comes up at that department. I also represent the dog warden as one of my clients and the Mental Health and Recovery Board. The Mental Health and Recovery Board, as you know, is a board that doesn't provide direct mental health services to any clients in the county, but they contract with the various providers in the county for those services. And so our office handles all of those contractual issues, of course any labor issues that come up through there, and any other legal issues that surround the Mental Health and Recovery Board is something that our office does. And so we also work directly, because of those contractual relationships, with the various providers in the county as well.
I was also assigned to the Youngstown Municipal Court, and I worked under Judge Kerrigan. And but he said I'm his second favorite prosecutor. But we had good memories as well.
So just let me comment. It's a little awkward on my screen, but the prosecutor's office, I think a lot of people, if they're trying to understand how the government system works, they know about the prosecutors, they see them in court maybe in a criminal case, and that's the only exposure they have. And if you're on the wrong side, that's bad. But they don't realize how many other things the prosecutors do generally. You know, they represent every agency in county government, and more so. maybe, and there's other semi-government agencies, so they do a lot of things like that, especially in the area we want to talk about is the mental health field and things like that. So people need to appreciate, the prosecutor's office does a whole wide range, not just one. So let's go down the list here.
My name is Melanie Ross. I am a community activist, also a radio personality, podcaster, and I have been a corrections nurse for almost 2 decades. So I'm familiar with the mental health part.
So what do you do?
A registered nurse.
Oh, registered.
I'm a registered nurse in corrections, and I do radio.
Okay. In corrections, you said?
No, I do radio. I talk about everything.
Registered nurse where?
In corrections nurse,
Yeah,
yes.
corrections, right.
So my name is Vicki Vickers, and I am the lead organizer for Action, which is a faith-based community organizing collaborative, and we work on issues of poverty, racial equity, and any injustice in the community. We just launched our mobile market to deal with food insecurity. You may have seen that in the news, and I'm quite proud of that initiative. I also work for the Ursuline Sisters. I have to mention that because I work in the Office of Mission, Equity, and Resilience with the Sisters. And I mention them because they are out in the community. They are doing boots on the ground work with a lot of the residents in Mahoning Valley, doing some good work. I also, through Action and through my parish, founded the Oak Hill Neighborhood Association about 6 or 7 years ago. And because of that, do a lot of work with the Block Watch and neighborhood leaders in the city of Youngstown. We've got a great group that meets monthly and discusses some of the same issues that we're going to be talking about today.
I'm retired Detective Sergeant Delphine Baldwin, KC, and I was with the Youngstown Police Department for 31 years. I'm still somewhat active in the community, spread myself around from Sojourner House to whatever organization I can work with.
Jennifer Gray, I'm the Social Services and Development Officer for Compass, overseeing the Rape Crisis Program for Mahoning County and Sojourner House Domestic Violence Program for Mahoning County, as well as other functions of Compass, which is a mental health and recovery board partner and provider of behavioral health services within the region.
Okay, well, that's a good summary, I think. We'll see how it goes. Who's going to step forward? We have to particularly relevant remarks. I'm sure we'll do it in an orderly fashion. Generally, what we wanted to talk about is mental health, and how mental health, counseling with the lack of it, affects the criminal justice system. And several people here have particular insight into that. So we had prepared a list of questions, just kind of as a guiding light. One of the questions comes up about the PTSD aspect of the justice system, not the justice system, the criminal system, and what's going on, the murders, the poverty, drugs, all of those kinds of things, and then how that is impacted by COVID. Does anybody have any comment about that?
Well, we met with Dwayne Piccarelli, and he's the executive director of the Mental Health and Recovery Board. And we actually invited him to attend today. Unfortunately, he had a scheduling conflict and wasn't able to attend. They have a lot of insight and a lot of information that would perhaps take up an entire panel discussion as well. And what we wanted to do in consulting with Dwayne and his team yesterday, we wanted to get some information that we could highlight for the panel, to discuss in general. A lot of the statistics through the prosecutor's office, we don't keep statistics for reasons or, maybe factors that contributed to someone committing crime. But what we do, and last year was our first edition, we did keep an annual report, and we published that last year, and that talked about all of our cases and number of cases that we processed. And, as a general matter, we saw a decrease last year in the number of cases that we processed through our office. Now, we don't know if that was a direct relation to COVID because we did not previously keep track of those trends in previous years. But even in most of the services that we provided for different clients, We represent the juvenile court, we represent children's services, we represent every agency in Mahoning County that provides services that could have been impacted by COVID. And we have seen a dip actually through COVID, because I think that you didn't have a lot of people reporting crime at that time. You had a lot of people who might have been victims of crime, but were stuck indoors. And so I think once America opened back up again, once people started getting back out, once we had connection again with these services, the reporting was starting to go up. So it's the jury's still out from our perspective on whether COVID had whether it was a direct correlation to what we have seen last year. I know our chief criminal prosecutor, Jen McLaughlin, could talk a little bit about what we're seeing this year, but we're still down for the number of cases that we've been, serious felony cases through our office. We're still down. And so I don't know if it is a trending down, but ultimately it will be trending up. But maybe, Jen, you could speak to a little bit about where our numbers are this year.
Yeah, well, this year in terms of felony indictments in general. Now, again, I can't attribute any of these crimes to PTSD. I can't attribute these crimes to COVID. But right now, we are on track, if things continue sort of at the pace that they are for the year, to indict about 600 felony cases for the year, which is less than we have indicted in, I think, every previous year that I have worked at the office. But I don't know what that says. I don't know what that speaks to. I know during COVID itself, when we were all on lockdown, to Gina's point, I was on the sexual assault unit, the VAWA unit at that time, and I know there was a huge concern there that there were cases of child abuse, cases of domestic abuse that were going on in homes, but because maybe those kids weren't seeing teachers, those women weren't seeing family or co-workers or people that maybe would have seen injuries, would have given them some outlet to report. We had a big concern on the VAWA unit when COVID was really at its height about how many child abuse or domestic abuse cases could have been going on during that time.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just agreeing with her because as a school nurse as well, did it during the day, corrections at night, that was our concern in the school building. Talk about it all, see, I got the information. I have the information. I will say that was a concern at the schools with everybody. It was like, okay, because we can look at that, we can look at any type of symptoms. From a nursing standpoint, I was able to see when, I call them my little people, would come often.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, they need attention. What's really going on? And the secretary, I would call the secretary. I said, okay, what's going on with this child because she's coming often? And then the secretary ended up, in this particular case, she ended up sharing, well, both parents are incarcerated. And then I go to work at night and I know the parents, And I was like, okay, so we give them more attention. But those teachers, the secretaries, the lunch aides, we were all concerned because of COVID. And she was right. You don't know who's actually reporting it. Now, on the other end, I can say during COVID, our domestic violence, people being picked up for domestic violence, it went up. There was a ton of intakes with domestic violence because they were in the house.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the domestic violence end of it goes, in March of 2020, for the first time in over 30 years, we experienced a 10-day span where absolutely no one called Sojourner House for services. And that's unprecedented in our 30-some years that we've been in existence. At that point in time, we worked quickly with law enforcement, the mental health board, the media, to let people know that although so many things were shut down, the shelters were not. And that was something that was seen across the state of Ohio. Shelters were struggling to get the word out because isolation is a significant component of abuse. And when you are residing with your abuser without interruption, how do you call for services? How do you reach out and get help? And that was something that was significant, continues to be significant, because although our numbers have bounced back, everything feels and seems different. Our cases feel and this is all qualitative, there's no quantitative data on this yet, but it feels like things are more profound, more significant, more violent, the stories. And I don't know if that's because of significant periods of isolation for families, that the violence becomes more, I don't know, I can guess. But we have experienced a considerable change since COVID.
I mean, so would it be fair to say that during the pandemic, a lot of the reported cases, they were down, but the actual cases may even increased because people, are, like you say, they're isolated with other family members who may be abusers, and then people don't even want to get out of their house. They don't want to go to the prosecutor's office or the police or mental health to get help because they're afraid of being told to stay home.
Right.
Quarantine, so that's a hard thing to figure out. It seems to me that one of the things that, if you would think about it and address it, is how do we determine who needs those services? That's what you all do, you don't want to do that. But that seems to be kind of a problem, isn't it? That how do we identify people that have need and get them the help? And one of the questions that I referred to, the old Woodside Receiving Hospital, and that was not necessarily the answer to this kind of question, but it's also a place where people would go, and they would be referred to. My mother threatened to send me there, that I would send her there, but those places were out there more, and there's less funding for that. So how do you see that impacting the treatment of mental health issues, especially vis-a-vis crime?
I could speak to that on a more global basis, in speaking with Dwayne Piccarelli yesterday, and I didn't realize, because I don't represent the Mental Health and Recovery Board. Dion does, and does a phenomenal job doing it. She also does work for Adult Protective Services, so it's an area that she's very familiar with and will be able to speak a little bit more about it. But globally, I was not aware of the services that are offered through the not directly offered by, but provided through Mental Health and Recovery Board. And we were talking about the Woodside Receiving Hospital, and because I shared your view as well, we need a place where people can go, and we're lacking that in our community now. But what I was unaware of is that through the Mental Health and Recovery Board, they have helped facilitate programs and wraparound services that did not that weren't provided by Woodside back in those days. And in particular, and what Dwayne had told us was that the sheriff's office, particularly the Mahoning County Jail, is one of the largest provider of mental health services in our community. And because of that trend, they have individuals placed within the jail. And I can say, because I've represented the sheriff's office, that was my primary client. I've been with the prosecutor's office 17 years. And I represented the sheriff's office, I still do. And I've been through 2 sheriffs now. And I could tell you Sheriff Green makes it an absolute priority to do whatever he can to provide the best services within their jail. And they actually just contracted for services through their healthcare provider for mental health. And so there are services in there. There are services, individuals through the Mental Health and Recovery Board on the ground at Mercy Health. There are individuals that are assigned to schools. And so you have the ability, and then you have wraparound services. So once you get in contact with an individual who has that need, you're not just throwing them out into the community. They have the ability to, we're going to schedule a meeting for you, we're going to schedule an appointment for you. The problem that we see from their perspective is the lack of funding and the lack of residential housing for individuals who need more full-time care. And that is a big problem. And the reason why, what we have been told, is lack of employees, lack of people going into the social work field. What I was unaware of, which Dwayne told us, is that they actually offer a scholarship program through the Mental Health and Recovery Board, and it is done through another agency, but it's for YSU students interested in going into social work. And I think that the lack of interest in that area has a direct impact on the mental health service industry. And I think so in identifying the individuals, we have those mechanisms in place. They may not be in a freestanding building, but they are located throughout the community, and they're located within agencies in the community. Sometimes the problem is being able to see it through, being able to provide housing and being able to track people on a more permanent basis until they reach, until they obtain the services they need and are able to go out on their own. And it is a funding and an employee issue. So, as this group, if I think that, and through our office too, we don't provide counseling, we don't provide mental health services, we don't employ clinicians. But what we do is we represent those agencies within our county and can provide the information so we can direct individuals where to go. Our prosecutors deal with victims of crime every day. They deal with witnesses, people who are in need of those services.
Do you still have a victim of crime?
Yes.
We have 4 actually.
Yeah, but I mean, that section.
We do.
They're grant funded. They're funded under the VOCA grant. And there are 4. There is 1 assigned to juvenile, 1 assigned to the county courts, and then 2 that work out of Common Pleas Court downtown.
Because see, one of the things that I see, maybe you can address this issue, how do we get people into getting them to couples or get them to wherever? There's a lot of people out there that we have access, we don't, they don't know how to use it. I do. And I mean, I'm privileged. I have access to it. I know what's going on, so I can get there. There's a whole lot of people who don't. I use the example, I try to get people to sign up for broadband. The problem in Youngstown is everybody's got access, but they can't afford it, they don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
How do you get from taking advantage of the resources, even if they're limited, how do you take advantage of them?
There's a huge, one of the things I just learned recently, some of you who are are the boots on the ground, you know more than we do. But there's a huge shift in how we are going to be treating mental health in this community and I believe it's nationwide. Back in the day, we had hospitals, people got admitted, that's gone. We know that's been gone for a long time. But even in the children services arena, this is where it was brought to my attention. The movement is going to be doing what Gina called wraparound services, meaning we want people in the household. We want to be able to have counselors. Government is honestly not going to be able to fund long-term care in residential treatment facilities anymore. There's a total shift away from that, which is perceived to be good, right? Because we know that once you get people institutionalized, it's really hard to not be institutionalized. That's something they've learned, and it doesn't take long. You house someone in a jail for 30 days, and they're likely to go back again, okay? And they know that now. And you house children in residential facilities where they're there for long term, they're likely to go back again. So as much as we can keep them away from those facilities, that's at least the thinking of the day, and some of you may be aware of that, is that so we got to shift the way we think about mental health and the way we think about providing services, which means so much is going on. So we have this total shift in how we're going to provide services, which is going to require more people, right? And there's huge lack, like Gina said, there's a lack of people going into social work. There's a lack of people going into that mental health field. We need to really encourage young people to seek out those careers and to find a path for them to be able to get the education they need to help provide the services. Because I think there's a lot of people that want to help. Like I actually teach at YSU in the evenings, and every time I have my students talk about why did you pick your major, I don't care what their major is, they tell me they want to help people. Yeah, so I say, well, that's great. So where do they go from I want to help people to I just want to make money? Somewhere there's a disconnect, right? So we need to bring that back. Well, and that's the thing. We want to bring it back so that they can, because I always tell them, if you help people, you'll be fine. Don't worry about the money, but because the key is don't lose sight of why you're here and what you want to do. But again, going back to the point, we need to figure out a way to how we're going to provide these services, because that's what government's doing. So be patient with us, because we're totally at a shift. If you talk to the head of Children's Services or the mental health board, and I was shocked and amazed at how of what we heard yesterday from Dwayne Piccarelli, because I've represented the mental health board in the beginning when I first came to the prosecutor's office in '94. Was one of my first clients, and they what they're doing is amazing. Like they're making the shift. But what we can do, like is for the prosecutor's office, we need to get out there and tell people what we do. What is our role in it? And that's, I know Gina has a big initiative of hers, that we could get out into the community, meet the people, here's what we do. But then also, like, at least I hear all of you talk, and you provide such phenomenal services, but like you said, people don't know. I'm like, gosh, do people even know that this is available? So like this here today is great, because we want to get it out to the people, so people say, hey, I'm not hopeless. There is a way. I can get help if I need it.
And I'm going to add one question though. How does the prosecutor's office evaluate the people that come in front of them for mental health issues? So a lot of people that are going to be charged with a crime. You can be charged with a crime, you may have all sorts of excuses, mental issues, domestic violence, all sorts of trauma, PTSD. Someone else may not. Do you have a mechanism or a rule of thumb, or you just hope that the prosecutors can see that, understand that? And I guess that would be directed to the criminal. You have to evaluate. Yeah, when I was in court, I was really able to go, okay, this guy is a bad guy. This woman is a poor soul that needs help. I mean, how do you do that?
We receive a motion. That's how, well, initially when they're indicted or we receive the case, I'm looking through it, and immediately there's red flags that pop up that you could see that, like, let's say a drug addict, the person's in the car, had to be Narcan, it still had the needle in their arm or something like that. So right away, that's what I'm even reaching out to the defense attorney and asking them. I think we have a viable offender here that might benefit from the drug court program. The issues are that if we have someone that might be, let's say in the vehicle, there might have been, let's say 8 baggies, a scale, a weapon, then that takes it outside the realm, and then on paper, I call it on paper, their eligibility requirements diminish. But I do then reach out to the folks that are going to do the assessment or later the evaluation, the treatment team, and I liken it to the putting up the card table and putting the sign out front, change my mind. And then we discuss this, because maybe this offender was only selling to benefit themselves, and there were some other issues. So, I mean, it's not black and white all the time. We're really looking deep to see if we can help folks.
So it's fluid, but you are trying to be cognizant of those mental health components.
And then back to mental health, yes.
And one of the
I just wanted to answer the question.
One of the questions I know that you're coming to that I think this kind of fits into when you get ready to talk about it are the diversionary courts. Yeah, the diversionary courts, that's something that we deal with. And I think mental health, to the question that you already asked, mental health has a couple different roles in the criminal justice system. You have people that are mentally ill to the point that they're not even competent to stand trial. So we're going to deal with them in a separate way, and a psychologist is going to need to evaluate them. You have people that are not guilty by reason of insanity. Those are the people that are extreme. Their mental illness has rendered essentially us unable to prosecute them. We've got people that their mental health issues would qualify them to go into the mental health court or some other diversion program. And then we have other people who clearly have mental health issues that they're considered just some sort of mitigation. We look at those and we think, okay, this guy's not eligible for diversion. This guy did commit the crime. We know he's struggling with mental health issues, but we still have to prosecute him. So I think depending on the case-by-case basis, mental health plays a different role depending on each one of those defendants' situations. I also think that we have some people that come into the system that they simply, and I'm sure probably everybody in all of these arenas that's here deals with people that we all feel that there is something mentally going on with them. They will not acknowledge that in any way, shape, or form. So those people, they don't apply for diversionary programs. They don't, because they don't want to acknowledge or say, I think I have PTSD, I'm schizophrenic, whatever their mental health issue is. So those people, I think often, they might pass through the whole process without anybody really being able to consider or offer anything for their mental health issues because they won't raise it.
No,
Well,
I
part of
think
that-
is that, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say as a follow-up, but those people who do end up in the jail are then availed of a lot of services through.
Then we get to that, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
so then you have all of those services, IROCs and all of those other things, and I know we'll get to that.
You have such a considerable amount of stigma that attaches to mental health. You know, if you go to your doctor and they say you're diabetic or you have a thyroid issue or any blood pressure, anything, okay, let's treat it, let's deal with it head on. But no one wants to go and talk to their doctor or tell their family that they're on some kind of medication to treat their mental health. There is such a considerable amount of stigma that attaches. And then, not only for the perpetrators that we're dealing with within the system, those that are actually facilitating the treatment, we don't address the mental health within our own field. When police officers sign up at 18, 19 years of age to become police officers and start going to school, they are not thinking about, I promise you, they're not thinking about being the mental health practitioners that we see in our community. They're not thinking about being boots on the ground. But then when you talk to police officers that are retiring, they are a completely different person because their mental health is affected, and if their mental health is identified as being affected, they are seen as weak, they are seen as less than, and we absolutely victimize our police officers by a lack of addressing that vicarious trauma that attaches, and that affects a lot, and we don't talk about that.
And that's probably leads to some of that, you know, when there is police brutality or reactions.
And I really appreciate you saying that because that doesn't come out enough. And I can tell you as a police officer for 31 years myself, dealing with rapes, domestic violent crimes, violence crimes about women, I thought I was so strong, okay? I just did my job. I handled it all the time. And one day, 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I just burst out crying. And my husband was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And all of a sudden it dawned on me, day after day, watching violent crimes against women was a big passion of mine. I work with Judge Kerrigan, the struggle, the fight to get other people in the police department to understand a division that I was in that I created, and that's what that vision was for, to deal with violent crimes against women. Thank God for a prosecutor like Dion Allmusi, okay? And I'm going to give credit where credit due, because when you're dealing with those issues specifically that affect women, sometimes you don't, we're the bottom of the totem pole. Everybody else's crime they look at, but it was a lot of work to be done as far as women, our mental health issues, and even me as an officer for 30-something years, I didn't realize how much that had affected me. So.
Yeah, that was always, we always had that problem with victims.
Yes.
One, they don't want to report it. Two, they come to court, and then they want to drop the charges. I can remember one famous case, guy comes in, wife comes in with a broken jaw, and because he was beating her with a frozen pork chop because he came home after 3 o'clock in the morning, she didn't go back. I'm like, yeah, that was like a shock. She wanted to drop the charges. So, is it a trust? And maybe these types of form are good for that. Because is it a trust issue between the victims out there and the police and the prosecutors? Do they have to get a comfort level in that? Don't you agree with that?
I do. I hear you, and I wanted to speak to what she said earlier because you asked the question. I was waiting to hear the answer. I'm like, I got the answer for that. When you were talking about Woodside, we started with Woodside and the hospitals. The issue around here, we have 3 hospitals here, and a lot of people don't know the information, just as you said, because you have Generations now. You have the place on Gypsy Lane, that hospital just opened up. And then you have Belmont Pines. I was saying bring it back because we're dealing with the people 18 and older, mental illness that have not been corrected as, when they were younger. I have the advantage of seeing it, but I will share this story, which was very impactful. I'm doing the intake process because I'm working at the Neil Kennedy Center, I can tell you. So we're going through that intake process, so you ask all the questions. This young man, 21 years old, and I'm looking like, and then I go over, I told you I'm a community activist. So I'm like, I need to know what's going on. This young man sat there, and one of the questions was, how did you start taking drugs? What happened? Because usually you figure trauma, you know, it might be hereditary, and those things you need to watch for those behaviors, okay? This young man, 21 years old, he told me his mother introduced him to drugs. Watch this. And it made all the sense in the world. He said, well, I was on Ritalin when I was young, you know, for behavioral issues. God, I'm not saying don't put your child on medication if they actually need it. I'm not saying that. But he said, and he was on it all the way up. He graduated from school, no follow-up treatment. See, here's the thing. So when you're a child, your parent is taking you. And it's like making sure that you get it. But then when you graduate, we have to take the initiative to say, okay, I need to do it on my own. But are they actually capable? So you got to start it at, that's why I was like, let's bring it back, because we're dealing with 18, you're out there in the real world and trying to cope. How do I cope when I was medicated all these years? So we have to start there. And as far as for the information, and that information is out there because I pass out pamphlets. So I do know. I'm like, yep, I've seen that. And it's, are you going to actually read it? So that's the thing, and we can't just browbeat people and say, okay, do, just like you brought up Sheriff Green. Yes, that's there. That's there in the county jail. The problem, we deal with dual diagnosis a lot, even at your drug rehabs, dual diagnosis. So it's like, okay, you're here for drugs, but this person has mental illness issues. Like, this is major, where I fear for my life. Are we going to have security here? You know, what's going on? And then which way do you go as a worker when you say that there's not enough workers? So pre-COVID, being a nurse, we had the workers, but then it's like you fear for your life. And yeah, there's money in nursing. Come join the nursing field. You know, there's money in yeah. There's money in the field, but you have to look at the bigger picture and say, okay, if this person is not treated properly, so let's say, for instance, you're there for a drug issue, and you have a mental illness issue. You're not treated properly, so we're there, and I'm speaking as a nurse being there, we're there to treat this drug issue. We know, like, depression, the whole line usually is coping mechanisms, you know, that's usually the issue. But then you snap out. So now we're in danger. Do we really want to put ourselves in that situation? And just like in jail and prison, you have the dual diagnosis. But here's somebody with a mental illness, and you put him in there with a mass murder or straight up criminal, and they're cellmates. Now what? You know, then a medical emergency is called, and he snapped on this person, but people aren't being treated properly because we're looking at, and this is, I'm saying as a community activist, you're looking at criminal, go to jail, boom, and not realizing what's the underlying issue.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was asking.
Right.
We have to be more sensitive to that.
So I say, go back.
So one of the couple questions about it, I think they kind of run together, is this idea of community policing, and which was more prevalent, you know, did we go through these broken windows and all that, some of which have been not discredited, but we don't have funding, we don't have motivation, we don't have the inclination. But was it last year, 2 years ago, big hullabaloo about defunding the police? And I don't think anybody in hindsight said, yeah, that's a good idea. But I always thought that it was important to spend some of those resources in training those police officers. And that's, we've mentioned it here, you know, police officers, not only for their own sake, but they have to have training to do this. You get a Sergeant Baldwin who was out there doing it all the time, and she could be an expert. Nobody else was, you know. So, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The money needs to be spent not on defunding, but actually funding the training and building the level of expertise to deal with the social issues. It's, you know, the police have a function, and we rely on them. And other services rely on them. Firemen rely on them in emergencies. Paramedics rely on them to maintain control. But that only goes so far. You have to know how to talk to people. You need to know how to recognize situations, and you need to know how to leave people with resources, whether they're the victims or the perpetrators. You need to be able to leave them with resources. Mahoning County does a really nice job of providing additional training to police officers through the Mahoning County Mental Health and Recovery Board, through the CIT training. And police officers go to a week-long course. It's comprehensive and exhaustive on the resources that are available in the county. But we need to do more of that, and we need to do it up front before police officers are getting on the street. And they need to be supported throughout, not only talking about what barriers they experience in intervening in these situations, both personally and professionally, but we need to do it throughout their careers, and we need to keep it current and meaningful.
And they can have feedback and see that it's not my problem, it's all of our problem. And those are some of the issues that I think police officers get a little isolated. Maybe that's where we get our social workers now, will be, our police officers.
Well, go ahead.
I couldn't agree more with that, Jen. And I can tell you from, a historical perspective in Mahoning County, and I think, we're unique. We have a justice tax, and Sheriff Green was instrumental in working toward getting that funding source there, because the problem that we see, I think, across the country is funding. And usually a law enforcement agency, especially in our case, the sheriff's office, is the largest agency who employs individuals. Their budget is the largest for Mahoning County. So when you have a funding issue, historically, the first funding is to go, or you take from the pot that is the biggest. And so you then have layoffs, and then you have issues, or what's the first thing that would go? Training. Well, because of these efforts, I can tell you under Sheriff Green's administration, he prioritizes training. And I know that because I was I dealt with his office and represented them for years. And so in Mahoning County, we're unique because we have that funding source, because we have such great collaboration between government officials that work together to get that funding source there. We prioritize training here. We prioritize those types of standards of conduct, and those are so important. But I know other communities aren't as fortunate as ours. And so you do see that, and you do see training going by the wayside in effect because you have lack of funding. But again, like I said, I think it is so important, and I think that, and I couldn't agree more, Jen, training before, training during, training all the time. When you have issues, we have employee assistance program that's funded through us, through the county. So if you have a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue, it's included in our insurance, and we are able to get help for the people who need it in order to combat some of the issues that they might be suffering from. But not every unit, not every community is the same. We can speak to Mahoning County because we live it every day. But it is a problem. We're just fortunate that we have the ability to provide that training here.
There was an idea that, and I don't know if this is appropriate for this conversation, but I had the opportunity to work with ICAC. I don't know if anybody else here has dealt with them. They're the Internet Crimes Against Children unit. They're not a Mahoning County unit. They will come into town. Yes, it's Internet Crimes Against Children. And they'll come into town sometimes to help with those, the internet operations, the stings, where we try to flesh out the predators that are trying to solicit children online to engage in sex. And you'll see press releases from the sheriff's office on those. So the ICAC officers that I got to work with told me that they, every 6 months for their job, are required to go in for an evaluation with a counselor just to see whether this job, because they're looking at child porn all day and they're dealing with these predators online, and it's upsetting. It's like what Sergeant Baldwin was saying about her job. That material is upsetting for the person who's handling it and looking at it every day. So I really liked that idea that ICAC has their employees go and get evaluated every so many months, just so that we can be sure that just in looking at that material and dealing with it, maybe they're not starting to have problems. I know federal juries sometimes, if they have to try a child pornography case, those jurors will be provided with essentially a debriefing and the opportunity to talk to a counselor after the trial, because those were lay people who came in who had to watch child porn as part of this trial, and it's such upsetting, disturbing material. So I would love to see some of those types of things available here for, you know, our officers, our prosecutors that deal with those cases. I think that's a really good idea, and to my knowledge, it's not a program that we have here now.
And I'll say this too, as someone who's been here for a long time. So, you know, unfortunately in Mahoning County, like over time, we've dealt with a lot of funding issues in this community because, you know, obviously there have been a lot of issues with, you know, the economic position of the county. So, and over the years, especially the last 25 years, we've had, you know, lack of funding, sales tax down, then you have no money, people get laid off. But we're coming back in the sense that we're able to, you know, create the justice tax and give a solid foundation, which now allows us to really go to the next step, right? So, you know, you get the people in place. Like you start with, we don't have enough people. Like we can't even do the caseload because we don't have enough people. And I know you all, I'm sure have experienced that in your jobs too. To the next step to say, okay, now we got the people, what can we do to keep them here? And what can we do to help them? And honestly, we've been having this conversation, like Jen just talked about that. You know, the attorneys who do these, who do not just the sex crimes, particularly the child sex crimes, but also our children's services prosecutors who prosecute the abuse, neglect, and dependency cases. It's a tough job. I mean, you are constantly seeing, like, and you know, as a school nurse, you're seeing these things that are so harmful. You feel the suffering with the people that are experiencing it, and you know, unfortunately I think in our world we all think we need to just, you know, suck it up and be tough, and particularly people I think that are in law enforcement in those positions. Well, we're tough, we're strong, we can, and I love the CIT training because it maybe helps us see, no, we're people just like everybody else, and when we are getting these inputs of all this negative stuff coming at us, there's going to be outputs, okay? Whether it's us acting out and perpetrating the crimes, or us acting out and just suffering and not being able to do our jobs. And if we could find a way to lose the stigma, this isn't you're a less than person because you have a mental health issue. Everybody has a mental health issue because this mind is connected to this body, and without it, it doesn't work. So whenever these negative inputs are coming in, we need to recognize that and to say it's good to get help. And then once we do that for ourselves, we won't have a problem trying to bring other people in. Right. Well, it's an individual mindset shift that we need. And hopefully we're moving that way. We're trying really hard in the prosecutor's office, I'm here to tell you, to see a change in attitude and to really be forward thinking.
You see, Dion, you would probably work with us a lot. How do you extend those mental health services beyond the official establishment? I mean, and there's a lot of people, and I look at Vicki, and she's with a group called Action, which is a congregation of faith-based communities, basically. And those churches might be an alternative. Thoughts on that?
Yes, I think our am I done? Our clergy are overworked, just like everybody else, you know. So, but to know that those resources are available is a good thing. And we actually just hosted a domestic violence workshop for clergy so that they listened to Judge Beth Smith's court. Did a phenomenal job talking about what that court does and what resources are available to, you know, if a victim happens to go to a congregation. So that was a great event a couple weeks ago. I would love to have someone from your office come to our neighborhood group and talk about some of the services that are available. That would be a great thing, because then those leaders can take it back to their residents and, you know, the specific block watches, as well as, like you mentioned, the clergy knowing that. But I want to, if I can go back to the community policing, because I think that was the original question. I can tell you that the leaders in our group love our community police officers. They feel that those relationships that officer makes with the residents is so important, and the collaboration that the police officers have with the mental health facilities and resources, you know, then that resident has that level of trust and knows who to go to when there's an issue. And then the funding issue, I think, comes into play, because so often when we've had our community police officer at an event, he's getting pulled away for another call, or he has to go assist another officer at another end of the city. So we need more police officers particularly in the city of Youngstown, in this community, and we need to be paying them enough so that they stay here and that they don't go to
Better discussion with city council.
I have talked to them about this. I have, yeah. But you asked about community policing, and I think that's a valuable, much-needed resource. And
I think the alternative ways of doing community policing, especially courts, as we were talking about, those kinds of things, we have to have that to move forward. I see them, some of them I'm not as convinced that we need to be that specialized. Things should be based on, is it a mental health issue or is it a drug issue? I'm not sure that along the ones I don't think we need. But anybody else have? Yeah.
I just wanted to, we were talking about the CIT training, and Dwayne
No,
had,
what is CIT?
so it's crisis intervention training. I'll let you answer that in a second, but what I wanted to say about that is, when we were having this discussion with Dwayne Drilla yesterday, he had advised us that at least one officer in every law enforcement agency within the county is CIT trained now. And that's not enough, I mean, but it's a start, right? It's a start, because that didn't exist, not very long ago. Obviously, some agencies with more funding have a lot more officers that are trained, but it's where we're going now. That's the path we're down now. So we're seeing a lot more of that. Obviously, the Sheriff's Department has many, many more trained both in CIT and in QRT. I'll let Jen talk a little bit more about. But that's where we're going with officers. So when we talk about funding and, where should that funding go, clearly that's where it needs to be. And we're seeing that, I guess, trend taking place now.
I think people will stop the idea of let's defund the police.
Right.
And not say, okay, that's
Absolutely.
Well,
Where's QRT? Is QRT?
you can speak on QRT, I'm not.
So it's a program to identify individuals within 72 hours of an overdose, so that somebody in the mental health field, in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department, will reach out to those individuals and their family.
Police
And-
officer. For that, we talk about the stress of officers, and that may have been separate, but those are questions.
So, years ago, when HIV and AIDS was hitting the scene, and we were identifying that as a pervasive social issue and virus, we started to take these universal precautions, right? And now your dentists wear masks, and we all wear masks and gloves and all of this stuff, way beyond COVID, before COVID. But what we have to also recognize is trauma, and things that we talk about in the mental health field is taking that universal precaution, a precautionary approach with trauma, that everybody has a trauma history, that you have to get to know people and what their trauma histories are when you're trying to interact with them, whether they're victims or they're perpetrators. And that's the beauty of CIT. CIT, this crisis intervention training, it's not unique to Mahoning County. They do it around the state and nationally as well. But the beauty of it is that these officers come in and they get to meet with practitioners in behavioral health agencies, social service agencies. They're learning about the resources. They're learning about how trauma infiltrates everything that the community is experiencing. And then they learn how to create their own toolbox, so when they hit the street and they go on that next call, they are better equipped to leave that call feeling like they've done something besides arrest, because you can't arrest social problems away.
Right.
And so that's the beauty of CIT, and we do it really, in my opinion, very well in Mahoning County, and Mahoning County really is very strong in working together in collaboration with prosecutors, with the sheriff's office. I mean, we have so many proactive, progressive thinkers. I mean, who would think that the Ursula nuns are as progressive and active in the community? They're a group of nuns, and I think that's fantastic. Yes. I mean, they rock. I mean, seriously, they're doing things that nobody else has thought about doing. And that's what we get in Mahoning County, and I think we fall short. And I say that because for the 6 years that I was that I worked for the Attorney General's office, I traveled the state and worked with different communities and saw how different communities responded to different things. And you know, there are police officers that go on calls and deal with, forgive me, dead children. And they are left untreated and alone. And then when they start to have problems, they're moved to the desk and they're shunned. And that's not the answer, you know. And it is that trauma, that universal trauma-informed approach that we get here in the county, and I think we have to keep pushing and working towards.
I want to add on to that, and I was introduced to this through my work with the Ursuline Sisters, and I believe it was Judge Delick's court who started the Stand, Grow, Thrive, which is the countywide trauma-informed care initiative. And the meetings that I've been to, there's folks from all fields, from social work, from education, from nursing, from the Ursuline Sisters, learning about those adverse childhood experiences, how that impacts our behavior, all of us, and then more importantly, building resilience. How do you address that and find the strength in a person? And I just wanted to throw that out there, that Stand, Grow, Thrive is on the Mahoning County website, and it's a wonderful resource in this community.
We're getting on to an hour, and I don't know, I want to be respectful of your time. But before we finish up, I'm going to ask if anybody has anything else. Does anybody else here have any questions? Any comments? Just observing? Okay, good. All right. So feel free to speak up. So does anybody have any last comments? And I wouldn't necessarily have to go down the road, but I do want to hear from you. You know, what do you take from all of this?
First of all, I want to say I am very grateful for this panel. Don't even know why I'm on it, because so many of you touched home with me when you were talking about police officer. And I just want to share one little story, although I have many that I was probably traumatized from, but because I thought I was the police and I had to be macho and there was things I couldn't show, I didn't realize until years later how I needed some help. And I just remember this one day, I got a call on the north side, and when I went to the scene, it was so horrible because a bus had ran over a 4-year-old girl, and the bus was still on her when I got there. So imagine getting out of the car. I'm the supervisor in charge of the scene. I can't break. I have people to supervise. Or in my head, I got to be strong. I can't show weakness. And all I remember, and the reason I'm talking about it today, was doing what I had to do, then leaving the scene, going around the corner, picking up the phone, calling my mother and breaking down. Okay? And many things I saw like that, all right? And I was on the mental health board for 8 years. I was on the children's services board. I was on all of those boards. And I'm sitting up there and I'm trying to be, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say, I want to say, and here I had mental health issues because of what I was facing, but for years I fought against counseling, all right? And I don't even know why I'm telling you this.
I'm glad.
I don't even know where
But there are, to your point, there are populations, professions, religions that shun mental health, that don't appreciate, you know, and we have to, that's where it goes back to the stigma, that it's a universal thing. It's, you know, I mean, in my family, we don't talk about some things, and that's how we were raised. That's not helpful.
And you brought me back to what I was trying to get to.
There you go, that's what we're going to do.
And because of who I was, I'm the police. I'm supposed to be helping you, okay? I mean, I fought against it for so long. And that's why I think for officers, we need to be exposed to more things like this and learning more about mental health instead of resisting it. Because I actually think in the end, I had a breakdown and didn't realize it. okay? So I just wanted to share that.
And one last, I have a comment, if I may, about the intersection of mental health and crime. I was a judge in Youngstown for a long time. And I was misdiagnosed. I had a DUI. I went away, voluntarily submitted to go to an in-house rehab. Not because of the alcohol or anything else, but because I knew I had a dual diagnosis. I had a problem. But one of the problems is where you went to places noted for that. And they said, okay, well, you're an alcoholic. No, I'm not an alcoholic. Back then, so weed, I'm just here to, I also have a depression issue. They said, oh, no, you're an alcoholic. This is the first time I'm an alcoholic is you're in denial. It's like a trip off. I admitted it, and I never really got. I went there for that kind of, dual diagnosis treatment. I got nothing. It was all about alcoholism. This was a Glendale. It was kind of known before that. And then even all through that, I had all the best psychiatrists in town. I was a judge. I can do it anyway. They all misdiagnosed my condition. Now it's lithium, Prozac, all these things that didn't help. I ended up in prison. By the way, nobody ever considered in my sentencing, oh, the guy's, he's got mental health issues, and let's try to help him. Is that abate or minimize or help him now? Straighten up, which he did, that's the time he did. But fortunately, I went away to a place that psychiatrists in the federal system said, oh, you're not depressed, you're bipolar. You've been treated for depression before. I mean, you finally got it. And I'm on the same medication today as I was in 1998 when I went to federal prison in Minnesota. So I thank God for that. That saved my life. But a lot of people out there don't have the good fortune to go to prison.
To get treated properly, right?
Well, I would just like to say in a general matter that I think that this is a very productive group. I think that we've discussed a lot of issues, from our office and our perspective. You touched a little bit about community policing. Clearly, we're a prosecutor's office. And I know that there are community prosecution units that are recognized throughout the country. Unfortunately, I don't know that for us, due to our size, you see that more in big metropolitan areas, but there are aspects of those functions that I think we could take and implement here. And one of the most prevalent areas is interaction with the community. Vicki, you mentioned block watches. That is a big thing that we want to get into. Yeah. I think that that is so important to sit back and to listen and to hear about what is impacting the community from the people who are actually being impacted by it. Right. And that is something that we as a prosecutor's office are 100% open to. We have, as in updating our social media, updating our presence and transparency. We've updated our website. We have a speakers bureau. We are available. If you need to contact us, we will bring someone out to your group based on the needs of your group, and we will speak. We've got information. Alan Rogers is our public information specialist, does a phenomenal job, and he put together some packets for each of you with all of our materials, and what you'll see in here is just the beginning. We've developed some brochures about criminal justice services. We've developed brochures about victim services. We intend to do more. But those are just a little bit, and we have a special needs registry, which I could discuss at another time. It's a great program that we've implemented. So from our perspective, please ask, because we are happy to interact. We're happy to be there. And so I hope that these types of roundtables continue for the foreseeable future, because I think they're very beneficial.
Anybody else have anything else? Yeah.
I just wanted to know, with these initiatives going on to help police recognize their issues and work on them sooner, is there any work with helping change police academy curriculum so that they're coming out prepared instead of being more reactive and going back in? Because I know that we have existing officers, but what about the ones that are coming out? Are we doing something to ensure that we don't have to double back now that we recognize this issue?
Well, I think that's a phenomenal point. And, you know, the curriculum is set, I think, by the state. And I believe then, if I'm not mistaken, that curriculum then is shared throughout the OPODA training sessions. I can tell you that in recent months, some of our prosecutors have become certified. And so now we are involved in the police academy and we collaborate. And so I think that's very beneficial, and I hope that the dialogue can continue with that. And if we have any impact and input, that is absolutely something that we would like to see, because I think that is a very good point.
Yeah, I'd like to see more
Absolutely.
proactive
Yep.
than reactive.
Yep.
And I was just going to say, it's 30 years now that I've been teaching in the police academy at YSU. And there is some information. If you look at the curricular in the police academy and you'd like to see changes, because there was, I challenged something when they cut the cultural diversity training, and I didn't understand why. Yeah, they did, because of one of my specialties is cultural diversity, and when they cut it from like 24 hours down to like 16 or something like that, I wrote a letter and I was questioning why they did it. So if there's any question like about the curriculum for the police academy, you can always write to the Ohio Police Officers Training Council, ask questions, give some input. If you get that curriculum, what you think that might be beneficial to police officers getting in that academy. Yeah, you can do that.
I know that the Attorney General's office does lead in setting that through OPODA, and which is the training academy for police officers, and they set that curriculum. And it is intense, but it creates a baseline competency across the board. What we don't prepare well for, and where it rests on field training officers, is when, you know, if I get hired to be a police officer in Canfield, Goshen, or the city of Youngstown, those are three very different communities. If I'm in Columbiana County versus Trumbull County, those are very different communities. And that's where it rests on that lifelong learning and those field training officers, because officers need to have the luxury of time to get to know their community as well. And you know, we're talking about police officers and prosecutors. They're key, but so are the dispatchers, the paramedics, the interns, the records clerks, all of our staffs that are seeing the evidence, that are hearing the testimony, that are processing the paper, the pictures, holding hands and helping people. Everybody has the trauma associated with these cases.
And just to add a little bit to what she said, that is one of the things that, you know, why I'm really involved with the police academy and the training of police officers. And that's why diversity is very important. That's why I had a problem when they cut that down. And because police officers need to know, a good police officer can work in any community with all types of people.
I want to thank you all for
You know, I would just say on behalf of Action, this was so valuable because our focus is building relationships, building networks, and I just envision a network so strong with all these wonderful resources that no one falls through the cracks, right? That every resident of our county has the opportunity to live to their fullest potential, and I think these relationships are important. So thank you. Thank you.
I hope we can continue to build those networks and those relationships after we've had a cup of coffee. And for the donuts. But thank you. And I really want to make a special shout out to the prosecutor's office.
Yeah, me too.
I'm very impressed that, you know, that you've got 5 people here.
Thank you for having us.
We're very happy to be here.
They told me there was food, so.